All right. We'll start off with the sponsorships. Year of Learning by Dr. Paul Koningsberg, in memory of his brother, Dr. Sam Koningsberg, Shimon Ruvain ben Leibush, and Ed Goldberg's cousin, Nissim Hara, Nissim ben Fardosa. Paul and Bob Bromberg, in memory of their dear friend, Julian Smith, Yehuda ben Yisrael. Malka Mann, in memory of her family, murdered in the Holocaust. Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Ben Shlomo Yaakov, Sarah Bat Ephraim, Yisrael David ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Ephraim ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Adia Bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Miriam Bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Pesel Bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shalom ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shlomo Yaakov ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shmuel ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch. The many friends of Dr. Marvin Blush, Moshe Shalom ben Yitzchak Halevi, friends of Toby Paris, Sarah Tova Bat Yisrael Dov, friends of Malka Levi, Malka Bat Yosef, friends of Avi Gitler, Rameir ben Shimon, Cheryl Sher, her children and grandchildren, in memory of her uncle, founding member of BRS, Dr. Israel Brook, Yisrael ben Harav Akiva. I also have a month of learning sponsored by Charlie Gelfenstein in memory of his mother Dacia Gittel Bat Meir Halevi and his father Meir ben Yaakov. Starting tonight through tomorrow, Adassa and Marvin Bienenfeld, a day of learning. I'll repeat it tomorrow. All right, that one is done. That one is done. Okay, today, a day of learning by Paul and Bob Bromberg, in memory of her father, Menachem ben Chaim. Also, Lillian Ziv, a day of learning in memory of her son, Yechiel Tzvi ben Yosef. May Hashem heaven aliyah, crank or refuge, wealthy Yeshua, Hashem Latliah, and L'chol b'nei Yisrael, a good Gaben Shtiyah. Okay, all right. Okay, the sounds like, okay, good morning. All right, so just a quick drink and then we'll start.
Who's that?
Okay.
Who's that?
So according to our the list that I have, by the way, if anybody needs a calendar, I have copies, so let me know and I can get them to you, okay? The newer calendars, the Daf Yomi calendars produced by the Daf Yomi organization, okay? Today is the 1st of November, and basically, I believe 3 weeks from today, we will be finishing Eruvin. Okay, so it's time that we start thinking a little bit about some kind of siyum. Right? I'll mention it to some of the other participants that aren't in our particular shiur. Okay, and looking to place to start for this morning, and since Pei Dalet is our day's daf, but it's not too long, I thought I would go back a little bit on the bottom of Pei Gimel Amud Beis. Okay, I'm going to start 4 lines up from the bottom. Okay, with the new Mishnah. Okay, this new Mishnah comes to try to support the view of Shmuel that was cited previously. Right? Okay. So the new Mishnah says, Tznan, Anshe Chatzer v'Anshe Mirpeset. though are those who, this is at least a 2-story, if not a 3-story building, okay? And you have those who live, I'm going to say, off the courtyard. And then you have I didn't like Art Scroll's translation of gallery. Okay, I preferred Corin's translation of porch, okay, or second floor, right? Okay, and then so you have those who live off the second floor, off the porch, right? Okay, so the issue is going to be, okay, assuming that there are walls or some sort of partitions, at least partly on the porch, okay, that seems to make it a separate reshus. And as a result, if those partitions are at least 10 tfachim high, and the size of the porch is 4 tfachim, that would make us ask the question normally, is that a separate reshus? And if they want to go down to a ladder or some other stairwell, okay, to the chatzer, do they and those who live directly off the chatzer, do they need to do a joint eruv? Or is it sufficient that they each do their own separate eruv? Okay. So understanding this as the background to the Mishnah, this Mishnah continues, Sheshachachu v'lo irvu, okay, that they forgot, okay, to make a joint eruv. Someone there forgot to make an eruv. Okay, kol shegavoa asara tfachim lemerpeset. Okay, according to this Mishnah, okay, anything that's higher than 10 tfachim, in other words, higher from the ground level of the chatzer above 10 tfachim, okay, that would seem to, so to speak, belong or usable to those who live on the porch. Pachot mikan lechatzer. If it's less than that, okay, it's usable to the residents off the courtyard. So if you have, let's say, a pillar, okay, or you have a mound of earth, or you have a large stone, any of these things, right? Okay, could be those are the items we're talking about. Now the Gemara asks then the question, Kal salka da'atach mai mirpeset. So the question we're asking is, what is it then that you're talking about as some kind of a porch, or as I said, Art Scroll said, gallery? And here's where we continue now with today's daf. B'nai aliyah, okay? So here we now have another word, the residents of the second story, okay? Now Art Scroll, excuse me, has a diagram that tells us to look elsewhere. Okay, 83b, right? The previous page, note diagram B. Okay, so in other words, that is its diagram, that we have one chatzer on one level, then you have 10 tfachim wall, and then it's as if there's a hill, then you have another chatzer. Okay. However, okay, let's see if that's adequate enough. The second story apartments. But when we think of second story, we normally think of the same building, not 2 different buildings, right? So to me, okay, that would be better to look at 84A1, diagram A, okay, where you have there, okay, but you would need those who live off the chatzer, like those on the side, okay, and then you have a second story where they can go in, okay, off the porch, right? Umay karula mirpeset. Why did they call this those who live on the second story a porch or a gallery, right? The kasalke b'mirpeset, because they ascend, they go up, okay, by means of that porch to get into their apartments, their homes. Alma, therefore, kol lezeh b'shilshul ulezeh b'zrika. Therefore, to utilize, okay, this porch as an area for carrying, okay, we have two different situations. We have those who have to lower b'shilshul items to put it on that mirpeset, and those who live off the chatzer, they instead have to throw it up to put it onto the chatzer. Notnim oto lezeh shebishilshul. We say that we generally give it to those for lowering, right? The second floor residence. Why? K'de'amar Rav Huna le'otan hadarim b'mirpeset, as was said by Rav Huna, for those who live off the porch, off the gallery, right? Hachanami, here too, le'otan hadarim b'mirpeset. Here too, we're talking to those who live off this porch. In other words, our principle that we saw so far is ease of use. Since it's easier to lower an item than it is to take it and throw it up on top, okay, the implication would be that that would be the principle that Rav Huna is using to say that's why they have let's say, the rights to carry or lower items there. So the Gemara then continues, Ihachi, if that's the case, Ema Seifa. I would say, look at the end, though, of our Praita. Pachot mikan l'chatzer. The end of the Braita, or the end of the Mishnah really said, if it's less than 10 tfachim, notice, okay, both on 84A1 diagram A or B, we see that the height there is 10 tfachim. If, let's say, the mound or the pillar is lower than that, that Braita said that's going to be, so to speak, given over for use to the residents off the courtyard. Amai, why is that the case? Lezeba petach, lezeba petachu. Why? Because we could then say that since it's lower than 10, it's more like a portal, a doorway. Okay? And therefore, clearly, those who live directly off the chatzer, it's easier for them to use it and carry and put things out onto it, okay? Whereas above, okay, off the second floor, it would not be easy use, right? Because it's the stone or the pile or the pillar is less than 10, they would still have to do lowering, which would be more difficult use. Okay. And so therefore, for them to have access, second floor people, to the porch, it's as if it's more like a doorway for them as well. All right? So therefore the Gemara asks, Mai lechatzer? So what about those items, okay, use of the courtyard? Af lechatzer. Okay? Our Mishnah said, even for the chatzer. Ushnehen asurim. Therefore, since the second floor people, in a sense, could have access to that, let's call it pillar for the moment, or whatever, okay, in the courtyard, if they both have access to it and they don't make a joint Eruv, Ushnehen Asurin, then they would prohibit each from using it and carrying and putting things onto it. Hachanami Mistabra. Here too, this seems logical. Midikatani Sefer, since it's also taught at the end, B'med Varim Amurim, what we're talking about, Bismucha, that this pillar or this item is close to the doorways of the residents on the Chatzer level. If it's farther away, Afilu Gavoa Asarat Tfachim, even if it is 10 Tfachim high, L'Chatzer, it should only be usually, right, to those who dwell off the courtyard. Therefore, my L'Chatzer, if we say that the Braita there or the Mishnah there really is saying it's for the use of those courtyard residents, what do we mean by that language? Ilema L'Chatzer V'Shari, if we say literally that it means for those residents off the courtyard and it permits them to use it, Amai, why is that the case? Rishuta de travayuhu. Okay, we're actually saying that if it's a petach for them and a petach also for the second floor residents, it should be permitted for both of them, which means if they don't make a joint eruv, therefore they are both prohibit one to another. Elamai lechatzer. So what is the language here? Lechatzer, af lechatzer, even for the courtyard. Ushnehen asurim, and therefore we say that that's why in this case they both would prohibit one another. So hachanami here too. Mai lechatzer. What do we mean when we say for the courtyard? Af lechatzer. Ushnehen asurin shmamina. So the implication is therefore, once more, that also to the courtyard, in other words, it would be forbidden not only to the people of the porch, the gallery, but also to those on the courtyard. Okay, now we come back now to a new Mishnah. And this new Mishnah again, okay, is going to try to bring us, right, a answer, okay, to what we are trying to resolve in terms of this portion of the Mishnah. Shaitznan. Here we have another case. Chuliat Habor. Okay, we have an embankment that's next to a pit, a cistern. Okay, Vahasela, or we have a large rock. Okay, that is there in the courtyard. Shehen Vohin Asara, and either one of them or both of them are at least 10 tfachim high, okay, because of the height of that item, either the embankment or part of the embankment and the depth of the pit, of the cistern, okay, versus also simply the height of the stone, of the boulder, okay. What do we say? Because it reaches 10 tfachim high, lemir peset. Okay, it seems to be given over for use, okay, for those residents off the porch. Pachot mikan, if it's lower than here, lechatzer, it's given over to those who live off the courtyard. Amar Rav Huna, okay, says Rav Huna, lo tan hadarim b'merpeset. Okay, he clarifies it, and it's saying that it basically, okay, to those who really reside off the porch. Okay?
I got it. Okay, thanks.
Okay? Tanach Sela. Now that seems acceptable when we're referring to this large boulder or rock. But the question then continues. Bor mai ikalamema. But in terms of the cistern, what do we have to say about this? Right? Amar Rav Yitzchak bereid the Rav Yehuda. He says here, what are we talking about? Hacha bebor mele'a mayim askina. We're dealing with a cistern that is full of water. And so according to Rav Yitzchak bereid the Rav Yehuda, we measure the question of 10 tfachim from the water's surface. Okay? And so therefore we're only dealing with the size of the embankment, okay, above the water's surface, not from the below the water's surface, the bottom of the cistern. Okay? So the Gemara challenges his explanation, right? Vaha chasra, but it's going to be lacking. Namely, as they draw the water out of the cistern, the water level reduces. And eventually then you're going to have a problem, okay, of the height, then of the item. If you continue to base it simply on water level, plus the height of the embankment next to the cistern, eventually it's going to be more than 10 tfachim, or at least 10 tfachim, if not more, and therefore shouldn't it only then belong to usage for the people of the porch, off the porch? Kevan de ki malya shaya. So the Gemara tries to answer this and says, wait a second, once it's full, the cistern, it's permitted, okay? Ki chasra nami shaya. Even though then the water level is reduced, it's still going to be permitted because it was permitted at the beginning of Shabbat. Therefore, it should be permitted all through the rest of the Shabbat, even though the water level has dropped. Adraba, just the opposite, says the Gemara. Kevan de ki chasra asira. Once the water level drops and there's a lack of water, there should be a prohibition there. Right? Kimalia nami asira. And therefore, likewise, okay, if it's going to drop eventually on Shabbat, it should be prohibited. It's even at the outset of Shabbat. Okay? And only be utilized by both if they do this joint eruv. Ela Amar Abaye. But rather Abaye is going to come and try to make another suggestion, another defense of Rav's position. Okay? Saying the following. Hacha babor mle'a perot askina. No, we're dealing with a cistern, a pit that's full of produce. Okay? And the produce reaches to the top of the embankment. But the Gemara then challenges likewise.
That's right.
V'hachasre. But eventually people take the produce and the height is going to reduce. And once it's reduced, have the same problem. But Tivla, answers Abaye. The produce is tevel. Okay? What do we mean by the fact that it's tevel? We can't, because it's tevel, it's a mix of truma and non-truma produce, and we can't tithe it on Shabbat, right? Therefore, once the height is at the beginning, a certain height of 10 tfachim or more at the beginning of Shabbat, it's not going to become reduced throughout the course of the Shabbat. The height is going to remain constant during the Shabbos. Well, how do we know that? How can Abaye suggest that kind of an answer? Daikanami. because the language, he says, suggests this through the exactitude of the language. The katani dumia de sela, because it says it's similar to the rock, to the boulder. In the same way, a rock's height is not going to decrease over the Shabbos. So likewise, he says, the tevel produce isn't going to reduce likewise over the Shabbos. Shma mina. And that's what we learn from this. However, the Gemara has now a different question to challenge Abaye's explanation. V'lama li lemitna bor. So why then do we have to teach one example with a cistern? V'lama li lemitna sela. And why do I have to teach another example with the rock, with the stone, with the boulder? Isn't it really the same case? Why do you have to give both examples? Tzricha. No, says the Gemara, we have to give both. Or this could be Abaye's answer. The iyashmein and sela. Because if I had only learned the example with the stone, with the boulder, deleka lemigzah, then there's no reason for the rabbis to have made any kind of a decree. Okay? In other words, right, they would say, right, there's no precautions here to say that maybe it would be reduced. And therefore we have to make a decree that you have to make the joint eruv. Okay? Aval bor, ligzor, but with regard to the cistern, they had to make a precautionary decree. Zimna demalia perot metukani, because perhaps that cistern or that pit would be full of produce that had already been tithed, and therefore people could take from it during Shabbos, and therefore the height of that produce pile would be reduced, and therefore you would get back to our original problem, tzricha, and therefore that's why we had to give two different examples. Okay, let's go on now, because the Gemara wants to try to come up with another attempt to solve this issue in the machloket between Rav and Shmuel regarding the brisa. Anshe chatzer v'anshe aliyah, people who lived off the courtyard and people who lived on the second floor, sheshachachu, they forgot, v'lo irvu, okay? And we say that they forgot and did not make a joint eruv together. Anshe chatzer mishtamshim ba'asara hatachtonim, okay? That depending on this object, this pillar, this wall, this stone, whatever, that the people who live off the courtyard may utilize the area below 10 tfachim or below. Va'anshe aliyah mishtamshim ba'asara ha'elyonim. And the people who live off the porch can use the upper 10 tfachim. That's assuming that our wall, let's say, or our pillar, whatever, is 20 tfachim high. Ketzad, how is that possible, asks the Gemara? Ziz yotzei min hakotel, that it's a wall and there is some sort of a ledge that comes out of the wall, okay? And the ledge is 4 by 4 tfachim, right? Lemata me'asara lechatzer, if the ledge is below 10 tfachim of the wall, then it's used by the residents of the courtyard. Lamala me'asara, if it's above 10, la'aliyah, to those people who live on the porch, on the second floor. Okay. Excuse me. But, says the Gemara, ha de beni asur. But if the ledge is right, if the wall is only 20 tfachim and the ledge is right in the middle, they prohibit one another from utilizing the ledge. The courtyard people prevent the second floor people, and vice versa, the second floor people prevent the courtyard people. Okay? Now, Amar Rav Nachman, says Rav Nachman in this case, trying to give an answer. Hacha b'kotel tisha asar askinan. No, he says we're dealing with a wall that's only 19 tfachim high. V'ziz yotze mimenu lamata me'asara. And the ledge that comes out of the wall is below 10 tfachim. As a result, that ledge, okay, creates for the courtyard people, it creates as if there is a doorway, a petach there. Lezeb a petach. Okay? Why? Because they just go right out and can put their stuff right on it. Out of their homes, it's level with the courtyard, with where they come out. Okay? But for the people that live off the porch, ulezeh b'shilshul, the only way they can use that ledge is if they lower items down to the ledge. So we might have thought here again that Abaye is utilizing that principle of ease of usage as his criteria to say who gets to use what. However, okay, the Gemara continues. Lamala me'asara, if the wall is 19 tfachim high and the ledge is above 10 tfachim, lazeh b'petach, for the people who live off the porch, for them, it's like an opening. They just walk out onto the porch and then they can put whatever they want, stuff, and onto the pillar or onto the wall or whatever, right? Ulazeh b'zrika, and for the people who live in the courtyard, to put anything on the ledge, they have to throw it up there. So again, we might think Abaye's rationale is the principle of ease of usage. And we say generally, ease of usage is the determining factor for who gets to use the item. But the Gemara is going to tell us, hold on, that may not be what Abaye is using as his rationale. As we go on now to say, on the top of Pei Daled Amud Beis, okay, Tashma, okay, namely, we're going to see the following. Shtei Guzuz Tarot. We have a brighter that says now we have two balconies. Okay? Zo lamala mizo. One above the other. And I would tell you, I had to draw my personal diagram. Excuse me, in this case, where they weren't one above the other, but they were sort of one with part of one sticking underneath and one sticking partly above the other, right? If you can see my hands that way, okay? So that's how the two balconies are, not immediately parallel, but one slightly sticking above the other and one slightly underneath the other. So they share a common area, okay, but not totally, okay? Asula Elyona velo asula tachtona, according to this Braita, okay? Those of the upper balcony did a Eruv, sorry, and those of the lower balcony did not. Shtehen asurot ad sheyarvu. Both of them are prohibited, okay, from unless they make a joint eruv. Now, what are they prohibited from? This Breita needs some explanation in that the area that overlaps between the two balconies, directly below it is a cistern of water. Okay? And so to utilize the cistern of water, what happens is the upper balcony made a hole in the balcony, built partitions around the hole, and they can simply lower a pail into the cistern. Whereas the lower balcony, for them to lower a pail into the cistern, since they don't have a hole in the balcony, they have to throw their pail up onto the upper balcony, get it through over the partitions, down the hole, and then lower it. Okay? Now that we might think still could be an issue of ease of usage, but we're going to see that that's not the case in just a moment, right? That's why the Gemara says, the brightest is shtein haserot ad sheyarvu. Amar Rav Ada bar Ahava, beba'in b'nei tachtona, derech elyona lemalaot. So Rav Ada bar Ahava suggests, no, it doesn't have to be that difficult. They have a ladder that can carry them, by which they can go up from the lower balcony to the upper balcony. They climb up the ladder, and therefore, for them as well, it's simply lowering their pail into the cistern. Now, however, Abai is going to say, hold on a second. Okay, my explanation, we're going to see in a moment, is not based on the principle of ease of access. Okay? Because I'm going to say as follows, says Abai. Amar Abai, Kagon de Kaimin betoch asara dahadade. Know that these two balconies that were just described in this Breita are actually within 10 tfachim of one another. If that's the case, Abai is suggesting they're really like a single domain and not like two separate domains. Okay, that's number one. Number two, Abai is also saying, V'lo mebaye ka'amar, that the language here is in the style of a lo mebaye. It's not necessary to state this because of this. Namely, lo mebaye asu l'tachtona, v'lo asu l'elyona de asire. Okay, it's not necessary, okay, for the lower balcony, right, to not make an eruv with the upper balcony, by which they would be prohibited. The kevan de bego asara dahadade kaimin asran ahadade. Why? Because we're saying that since they're situated, they're located within 10 tfachim of each other, okay, that naturally, if there's a single domain, okay, it's as if, and they don't make a joint eruv, they naturally are going to prohibit one another. That's what Abaye is saying. Ela afilu asu le'elyona, v'lo asu le'tachtona. But even if they made an eruv for the top balcony and didn't make one for the lower balcony, salka da'atcha amina. it's possible, I might have thought that one could have said, de lezeh benachat, v'lezeh bekasheh, that maybe you would have thought I was utilizing the principle of with this one with ease and with this one with difficulty. Litvei lezeh tashmisho benachat. And therefore, I would, so to speak, give it over, award it to the one who has the easier usage. Kamashmala comes to teach us, however, okay, the following. Kevan de bego asara kaimin, since we're saying that is within 10 tfachim that the two balconies exist, asran ahadade, that they do prohibit one another. Okay? Kihad amar Rav Nachman, amar Shmuel. Just as that was said by Rav Nachman in the name of Shmuel. Okay, with another example, the following. Okay, Gag hasamuch l'reshut harabim. Okay, we have a roof. Okay, that is near the public domain. Okay, tzrich sulam kavua lahatiro. Okay, right. That namely, the residents of the courtyard need a fixed ladder in order to be able to climb up and use the roof, okay, as for any purposes on Shabbat. Why? Because we're going to see that since the Reshus Harabim is on the same level of the roof, it's possible that people from Reshus Harabim utilizing the roof could prohibit the people of the Chatzer from utilizing it in that case. All right? So he says, Gag hasamuch leReshus Harabim, tzrich sulam kavua lahatiro, that it has to be a fixed ladder for the courtyard residents to go up there to use the roof. Sulam kavua en, sulam ari lo. You say it has to be a fixed ladder, yes. A portable ladder, okay? A temporary ladder, no. My tama, what's the reasoning? Lav mishum de kevun de betoch asara de hadade kaime. Asran ha'adade. Is it not because the two of them, the roof and the public domain, are, so to speak, parallel with one another? And therefore, since they're parallel within 10 tfachim of each other, they're going to prohibit one another? Matkifla Rav Papa. Rav Papa challenges this and says, V'dilma kasherabim mitkafim olav bekumta v'sudarta. He says, because when many people travel the public domain, the Reshus Harabim, it's not uncommon for them to remove their hats or their scarves and to put it down on the roof, since the roof is less than 10 tfachim lower than the public domain. If it's a hot day and they want to remove their hat or their scarf, they sit down, they stop, and they put their hat down there. So that's the principle, he says, where they could prohibit one another. Okay? And therefore, that, in a sense, comes to tell us that you cannot, right, use Rav Papa's challenge cannot be removed to say why there could be a prohibition between use of the roof by the courtyard people versus use of the same roof by people traveling on the Rishus Harabim, on the public domain. Okay? Now, Gemara still has not solved our issue here. And we're going to continue just a little bit. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. So he's going to try to give another ruling by which we can come up maybe with an answer. Okay? Let's just go over a little bit. Bor shebein shtei chatzerot. Let's say we have a situation where we have a cistern and there's walls on either side of the cistern. And then beyond the walls, there are habited courtyards. Okay? So bor shebein shtei chatzerot, somewhat similar to the diagram on 85A1, opposite note number 2. Okay? I will tell you the Koran has a little better diagram, a little better picture. Okay? What happens? However, says the text, Mufleget mikotel ze arba'a, it's separated from one wall by a distance of 4 tfachim, umikotel ze arba'a, and from the other wall, okay, the wall is separated 4 tfachim, right? Umikotel ze arba'a. Ze motzi ziz, this one puts out a ledge, kol shahu, of some distance, umimale, and therefore from the ledge they can lower a pail down into the cistern and, right, pull up water, because the ledge then has reduced that 4 tfachim distance to less, and therefore it's considered same rishus. V'zeh motzi ziz kol shehu umimale. And those on the other side also put out a ledge, and they can do, and they hang over and they get down, right? Rav Yehuda didei amar afilu kanya. And Rav Yehuda himself said it didn't have to be a large ledge, okay, even something as thin as a reed. In other words, it's a reminder, okay, to show a change in the status of the rishus. Okay? And that's where we're going to stop today, okay? Because Abaye then is going to try to challenge and question what this is going to be about. And we'll pick that up tomorrow, okay? With more.
Okay, thank you very much. Have a great day.
All right, everybody. Thank you. Take care and stay well, everybody.
Be well.